Good evening, everybody. All right. Well, thank you all for coming out. I'm Jennifer Scoggin. I'm the director for the Office of State Lands and Investments. And with me tonight, we have Deputy Director Jason Crowder and Ben Bump. He's our Assistant Director for our Field Services Division. Again, thank you for taking the time to be here this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to collect public comment on the proposed disposal of the Kelly parcel, which is located in Teton County. This public comment solicitation is conducted pursuant to the Board of Land Commissioners, Chapter 26 Rules and Regulations. Our format tonight will be pretty straightforward. Deputy Crowder is going to provide a brief summary of the proposed disposal. He has a PowerPoint slide deck that he's going to go through. We're not going to spend too much time on it. The detailed analysis and the slide deck are on our website, so you can find copies of those documents there if they're of interest to you. After the presentation, we're going to take a few questions. And then after the questions, we're going to take a short break to give everybody who would like to make public comment a chance to fill out one of those pink comment forms when you came in. And then we will proceed to take comment after that. This meeting is live streamed on YouTube, but we are not on the Zoom platform, so we unfortunately cannot take public comment digitally or in the chat boxes or any of that. We have no way to record that. So before we start the public comment period, we'll gather up the pink slips, if you will, and then we'll call folks up individually to come up and provide their comment. We will keep the comment forms and provide them to the Board of Land Commissioners for their consideration. We will also provide the Board of Land Commissioners with the summary of the proceedings tonight. We will also continue to accept written public comment until December 1st, close of business. You can either email comments to Deputy Director Crowder, or you can send them snail mail, or and his contact information will come up at the end of his presentation. The board, this issue will be before the board at their December 7th regularly scheduled State Board of Land Commissioner meeting. This is a proposed disposal. No decisions have been made at this point in time. We are not the decision makers. The board is the decision maker. We are merely gathering comments pursuant to our process. So we've heard a lot of comments to date. We were in Jackson, I believe it was November 9th. And then after this hearing, we will have another public comment period in Cheyenne on the 21st, and then in Cody, the 28th. So there is additional opportunity for live public comment. If somebody would like to attend one of those hearings, that's perfectly fine. Or as I mentioned, written comments are also fine. So with that, I will turn it over to Deputy Director Crowder, and then again, after the question and answer, we will take the break to fill out the pink comment forms.
Thank you, ma'am. Figure out how to hold this thing so you all can hear me. It's a pretty small room, so we should be fine. But again, like the director mentioned, thank you for coming to this public hearing. This won't take too long. We published the detailed analysis in October, so hopefully you've had enough time to review that and we don't have to go through it page by page. But what we like to do first is let you know who we are and why we do what we do before we get into the actual transaction. So the Board of Land Commissioners are constitutionally created to manage all state trust land across the state of Wyoming. The board is made up of the governor, secretary of state, state auditor, state treasurer, and the superintendent of public instruction. They manage all of these lands for 13 different beneficiaries that we will get into in just a minute. But they have a constitutional mandate to do all leasing, all land acquisitions, all management of all lands across the state. And these are the 5 individuals that we work for. We serve as their administrative arm. They are the decision-making body. They work on behalf of the state's beneficiaries. Like I said, there's 13 of those. 86% of that is the common school system. They manage 3.4 million surface acres and 3.9 million subsurface acres for those beneficiaries. The other 12 beneficiaries make up the other 14%. And I think we can go to the next slide. Go to the beneficiaries. This is the list of beneficiaries that they manage for. The Kelly parcel is identified for the benefit of the common school system or the K through 12, but you can see the other beneficiaries that we manage for: the fish hatchery, the agriculture college, all the way down to the state law and the state library. We are the Office of State Lands and Investments. Again, we serve as the administrative arm for the Board of Land Commissioners. Director Scoggin oversees the whole operation, and I help her out. But we also have 4 divisions that manage all of the lands across the state. The first is the Trust Land Management Division. This group is in charge of all leasing, all subsurface and surface leasing. So that includes grazing, that includes easements, that's coal leasing, oil and gas leasing. Everything that happens on the ground goes through that division, including renewable energy leasing and land transactions. So this transaction has gone through them. Second is the Wyoming State Forestry Division. Obviously, they manage all the timber resources on state trust land across the state. They also have a large responsibility for fire management and assist the counties in wildfire suppression and management. They also have a very good private land forestry management responsibility. So if you have private timber on your lands, these guys will help you manage that timber to either sell it or create healthy stands going forward. The Field Services Division, the division that Ben here oversees, they are in charge of all of our compliance of all the leases across the state lands. They also manage all of our appraisal activities as well as all of our GIS, and anything you see online runs through his shop that comes from us. Lastly, the Administrative Services Division. Like I mentioned before, we are a revenue generating agency. We have a lot of very good people who track all of those monies for us. They ensure that they are distributed to the beneficiaries appropriately and pay the bills that we rack up. The distribution is important, and I want to hit that just a second. In fiscal year 2023, this whole office generated $223 million off of state trust land that was distributable to the beneficiaries. So we take our mission very seriously of effectively managing natural resources and funds for current and future generations. Those funds are immediately given to the beneficiaries to run the common school system, to help the fish hatchery do its operations and things like that. The Board of Land Commissioners has given us objectives to follow when we make leasing recommendations and when we look at land transactions and move them through the process. They're called the Trust Land Management Objectives. These objectives have also been provided to the board at a very high level by the legislature. The board has further refined them and has told us to look at each one of these in a priority order. So we look at each one in every decision that we offer to the Board of Land Commissioners. However, every opportunity, every land transaction, every lease doesn't need to hit each one of these objectives. We just need to review them every time we do anything. So our first priority is obviously revenue generation, and that's what we look at first and foremost. How does that benefit the beneficiaries, their revenue streams? And the second inside of that bucket is the investment value. How does the land portfolio currently held benefit? Should we diversify? Should we move it? What's its impact? Whatever use that we're analyzing. The second objective is to improve manageability. Obviously, we are a state agency and we want to work a little bit more efficiently in everything that we do. So we look towards that, and the board has told us to consider that. But also look at consolidating ownership patterns. We've recognized an efficiency when we can consolidate ownership patterns, and we can leverage other state agencies, other sister agencies' efforts, and we don't have to do all the work. So we leverage and seek help from the Game and Fish Department, the OGCC, the DEQ, BLM, and Forest Service as well. So we try, and we're required to look at opportunities to increase that. The third and last in priority for the trust land management objectives is to meet a specific school or community need. This is where recreational access comes in. Obviously, it's not a huge revenue generating aspect for us, but sometimes it does. But it's the last thing. And also within this bucket is to improve stability of a community or provide growth opportunities. when we were in Jackson, and everybody understands Jackson is very landlocked by federal land and has a hard time growing. There are a lot of municipalities within the state that are landlocked by state land, or the only growth direction is through state land. So we are to look at what can we do to help that community grow and provide some opportunities for them there. We have an interesting management paradigm. A lot of folks think state land, state trust land is public land. It is not. It is trust land. It's held in trust by the beneficiaries. It was put in that trust by the Constitution and managed by the Board of Land Commissioners. So this is one of the interesting paradigms that we try to educate as often as we can. The state trust land is not public land. It is trust land. The Office of State Lands and Investments is not the BLM, is not the Forest Service. We have different management obligations. Ours is to optimize revenue from those assets. Theirs is for largely multiple use and sustained yield. So there is a difference, and we manage in that difference. So we don't manage like the BLM or the Forest Service. What brings us here today is obviously a proposed disposal, so it's important to talk about the process of had the life of a proposed disposal. So oftentimes we get a proposal submitted, and then we move it to the Category 1 list. That Category 1 list allows us to do a real cursory review of the transaction. Does it have the opportunity to meet the trust land management objectives or not? If it does, we provide it to the director for review, and if all of the application fees and whatnot are provided, then we move it to the director's review. She has the ability to look at it for its merit for the trust land management objectives. Does it have the opportunity to meet those or not? You can see there's a dashed line behind that box because she could determine that a proposed transaction does not have the ability to meet trust land management objectives. She could deny it at that point, and then the application or the transaction simply stops at that point. However, if she does move it forward, if it does have the opportunity to meet trust land management objectives, then we start preparing a detailed analysis. And that is everything that's tied to that parcel. It really is built around the appraisal. We use a lot of information that's derived from the appraisal process to go into that. But we look at the valuation, we look at the appreciation potential, we look at the current income streams. Again, revenue is our top trust land management objectives. But then we also look at what are the wildlife impacts, what are the habitat impacts, what are the cultural resource impacts, and we utilize sister agencies to provide that information for us because we don't have that expertise in-house. Once all of that is completed, the detailed analysis is complete, we publish it to the public, which has happened in this case, and that starts a 60-day public comment period. So as the director mentioned, we're right in the middle of that. We're receiving your written comments within that 60-day public comment period, and we are also to hold public hearings. The core requirement is that we hold that public hearing in the county where the land is affected. Director mentioned we did that last week. This is a very unique parcel, has statewide implications and statewide interests. So we are moving across the state, as she also mentioned, doing public hearings at each one. So giving ample opportunity for the citizens of Wyoming to provide comments to this transaction. Once the 60-day public comment period is up, we're required to bring everything to the Board of Land Commissioners for consideration. So we will bring them the detailed analysis. We'll bring them all of your comments, written and verbal, all compiled for them to make a good, holistic decision when they consider it. There's a dashed line behind that box as well. They could deny this transaction or any that go through this process, or they could move it forward. But again, they do so having all of the information that has been put together in the process before it. If they tell us to move forward in a disposal, the Constitution requires that all lands be sold at public auction. And the state statute requires that we advertise that public auction for 4 consecutive weeks. So we will do that once the Board of Land Commissioners tells us to move forward or not. They tell us to move forward, we do the 30-day or the 4 consecutive week advertising period, leads to the public auction, hold the public auction, and then get a successful bidder out of that and move into closing. So we have had a long history with working with Grand Teton National Park, with the lands within the outer boundaries of Grand Teton National Park. And so we thought it would be important to give you all that information so you know what brought us here today. in this timeline, you can see that where we start is 2003. Obviously, conversations have started long before that. But the late Senator Craig Thomas saw the importance of these lands for the beneficiaries for the K through 12 school system, and that we were limited in our ability to benefit those beneficiaries to their optimal level, as well as recognizing the benefit to the park system, the Grand Teton National Park, with how they laid and how they were used by wildlife and everybody enjoying the park. So in 2003, he was successful in passing Public Law 108-32, which was the Grand Teton National Park Exchange Act. It authorized the federal government to acquire the state lands within the outer boundaries of Grand Teton National Park through donation, purchase, and exchange. Once that happened, largely nothing else happened until 2010. The Board of Land Commissioners decided to take some action and start to move the needle forward. So it sent a notice to the Department of Interior that if it didn't start completing the action pursuant to the authorization it was provided within Public Law 108-32, that it planned to sell the parcels within the outer boundary of the park. That did kick off some conversations, and later in 2010, the Board of Land Commissioners was successful in negotiating an agreement with the Department of Interior. The agreement was called the Agreement for the Conveyance of Interest in Lands, and identified 4 parcels within the outer boundaries. Each one of those parcels was looked at individually, and the agreement stated that each one could be acquired individually. So on a parcel by parcel basis, for a specified amount that was determined by appraisal, it also gave a date that each one of those parcels was to be acquired by, and that it conditioned the agreement to be valid on the legislature providing direct sale authorization to the Board of Land Commissioners. Again, like I mentioned earlier, Constitution requires all state land be sold at public auction. That is, unless the legislature provides direct sale authorization, and we can get around that requirement. So in 2011, the legislature followed suit and passed House Enrolled Act 22, providing that direct sale authority to the Board of Land Commissioners. And then in 2012, on January 5th, 2012, the Department of Interior was successful in acquiring the first parcel, which was a $2,000 parcel, a mineral estate only parcel that we called the Jackson Lake parcel. And then in 2013, on January 5th, 2013, it also acquired what we called the Snake River parcel for $16 million, and it was a surface and mineral estate parcel. There's a pattern here. So the dates obviously were January 5th of each year, and it went for 4 consecutive years. So in 2014, the next consecutive year, the department was expected to acquire the Antelope Flats parcel. However, they were struggling in pulling all the funding together to acquire that parcel. Many of you know that was valued at around $46 million. So they came to us and said, we will not be able to make that date. We need to look at other forms of conveyance. We need to look at extensions. What can we do? So the Board of Land Commissioners, in conversations with the Department of Interior, did end up amending that agreement and amended it with certain terms. It said that all of the parcels remaining, which were just the Antelope Flats parcel, just the Kelly parcel, would be reappraised. And if the appraisal came in less than what they were originally appraised at, the department would honor the original appraisal. So there wouldn't be a backstep in value that the state would receive. It extended the deadline to January 5th, 2016. It also said, we'll give you a little bit more time. If you substantially show progress in administration of, or the administrative process in acquiring these parcels, that can be further extended to December 31st of 2016. It said that the board would not be responsible for any costs. All of those would be borne by the Department of Interior, and that if the Department of Interior failed to perform to these measures, that the remaining parcels would be placed on the Category 1 disposal list. It needed an extension of direct sale authorization as well in that amendment, so the legislature followed suit with Senate Enrolled Act 69 in 2014, further providing that direct sale authorization, but it also recognized that there could be other transfer options available, like an exchange, and it granted some authority and sideboards with how that should look. It created what they called the State Land Exchange Advisory Panel as well at that time. So we did a lot of work, knowing that the federal government was a little limited on funds, in seeing if there was a possible exchange scenario that would be viable to transfer these properties, and did that 2014 through 2015. Unfortunately, that is a very complex process. You have all recognized that these are very valuable pieces. The Department of Interior doesn't have a lot of lands within the park system to offer as trade. In fact, they probably are limited in even doing that type of work by existing law. So they were looking at sister agencies or other agencies within the Interior's umbrella, like the BLM, to use lands as exchange lands. With the expense or the value, high value of these parcels, that meant a lot of BLM land had to be included to make the exchange work. When you start adding a lot of federal land together, a lot of the analysis, a lot of the NEPA work, a lot of the cultural resource investigation just becomes a very huge amount of work that becomes almost undoable and very expensive to complete. So in 2015, the Department of Interior made the decision to stop working on that exchange and rather focus its attention on just purchasing the Antelope Flats parcel. Sorry, go back, Ben, I didn't finish it. In 2016, the Senate File 88 was passed to try to extend the time period for direct sale authorization. That attempt had failed. However, later in 2016, December 12th, 2016, the federal government was successful in acquiring the Antelope Flats parcel for $46 million. And I stated in Jackson, and I still need to make this change to the presentation, this whole column, the sale of the Antelope Flats parcels, should be extremely highlighted. The federal government did a lot of work to try to come up with half of the $46 million for the acquisition cost of that. However, through donations, they were able to fill in the gap and come up with the other $23 million. So was a huge donation effort that actually made that sale happen from the community in Teton County and across the state. But in 2016, they had not yet acquired the Kelly parcel. So at that point, all authorizations, the amended agreement that the board had entered into, expired on December 31st. All authorizations provided by the legislature for direct sale also expired on December 31st, 2016. So pursuant to that amended agreement, automatically the Kelly parcel, being the only remaining parcel, was placed on the Category 1 disposal list. The legislature did make two attempts in 2017 and in 2021 to further provide direct sale authorization to the Board of Land Commissioners to continue its work with the Kelly parcel. However, both of those attempts failed to pass the legislature, so we still did not have that direct sale authorization. Pursuant to the board's rules, the Kelly parcel was placed on the Category 2 disposal list by the director on February 18th, 2021. And again, it had the potential to meet the trust land management objectives, specifically the revenue and the investment objective. And then on 2023, we had all the information compiled that was necessary to publish and complete the detailed analysis. So we published that detailed analysis on October 2nd, 2023, which started the 60-day public comment period, which runs through December 1st, 2023. That is how we have gotten to where we are today. This slide just shows the four parcels that we talked about with the Department of Interior, their dates of acquisition, their value, and what they were and their size. I won't go into this too much. Again, as the director mentioned, this slideshow is on our website, so you can refer back to it later. Specific to the Kelly parcel, it is located in northern Teton County, north of the town of Jackson, highlighted by the yellow dot. It's surrounded by Forest Service, Grand Teton National Park, and the National Elk Refuge. This is how it sits in northeast Wyoming. And again, all these maps are located within the detailed analysis and online, so we won't spend too much time. This is an important map, and I'm going to ask Ben to go one more. I think this is a little cleaner, a little easier to understand. Obviously, the Kelly parcel is highlighted in blue. It has 3 easements that go across the property. One is for a power line, and the other one is split into, it is for the Grovont Road to traverse the property, but also there is a scenic easement that goes on either side of the property, and it's highlighted in yellow. Both of those easements encumber approximately 156 acres. So again, quickly, the Kelly parcel is located approximately 14 miles northeast of the town of Jackson, 640 acres in size. It's surrounded by federal ownership. It's accessed by the Grovont Road. However, development is possibly limited by the scenic easement. We have existing uses on the property of a grazing and agricultural lease, easements, as I said, and temporary use permits. It's also located within the Jackson core area. That's subject to the 2019-3 Governor's Executive Order for the protection of core area habitat. As we mentioned in the timeline, it was placed on the Category 1 list originally by the Board of Land Commissioners on December 31st, 2016. By function of the expiration of the agreement, it was placed on the Category 2 disposal list by the Director on February 18th, 2021, and we anticipate the Board of Land Commissioners to consider disposal of it on December 7th, 2023. An appraisal was completed. The valuation came back with a highest and best use of 35-acre home sites or building sites. That comes out at $97,539.06 per acre, or $62,425,000 in total. Existing revenue generation, as I said, comes from 1 grazing lease that returns a little over $1,800 a year, from 3 temporary use permits that return $1,040 per year, for a total annual income of $2,845.65. And this is the slide that has the most meat on it. What we tried to do here was provide a comparison of what if you held the property for 10 years versus disposal of the property for 10 years. So we analyzed appreciation plus that current income that we spoke about in the previous slide, multiplied by 10 years, and this is what the comparison looks like. So we started with $62,425,000 as the appraised value. It appears that through NASS data, National Agricultural Statistics Service data, that all rangeland across the state of Wyoming averages an appreciation rate of 3.52%. So this is vacant land, undeveloped land. The appraisal also mentioned that the Kelly parcel is currently appreciating at 0.6% per month, which equals 7.2% on an annual basis. So we took those two numbers, added the annual income that comes in from those properties, multiplied by that by 10, and we got a low range if you held it of $22 million and a high range if you held it of a little over $42 million. It's important to note this is appreciation, and appreciation is only realized upon sale. So this is the value of the parcel as it goes up, but this money, this amount of benefit to the beneficiaries is not distributable to those beneficiaries, and they can't get that money until they sell it. So that's why we put the last column in. What happens if you sell it? We reached out to the state treasurer's office. If we were to sell this at public auction, all proceeds would be given to the state treasurer. He would invest it through the Common School Permanent Land Fund, and their expectation of investment earnings over the last 5 years is 6.4%. So we use what they gave us, 6.4%, multiplied that by 10, and the return off of those investment of the appraised value, the earnings is expected to be almost $40 million. Now that $40 million is distributable to the beneficiaries. It is something that the legislature can provide to the beneficiaries on an annual basis. Again, divide that by 10, so it's approximately $4 million, but that is something that the beneficiaries can benefit from immediately. With that, Madam Director, I will give it back to you for public comment. I'm sorry, do you want to answer questions?
I was going to say, why don't we take any questions that folks might have at this point?
Sorry. I glossed right over that. So what we want to do is provide you the opportunity to ask some real general questions. We'll try to answer them as much as we can before we get into the public comment period. Jake. I saw just a picture of a pronghorn on your slides there. You mentioned that you take in the consideration of the wildlife in your assessment. How did you guys factor in the sublet migration herd?
in your assessment how 32 parcels, being broken up is going to affect that?
Good question, Jake. So to restate it before you got the microphone, he noticed that we had pictures of wildlife. How did we analyze wildlife in our detailed analysis, and specifically the sublet migration herd, the pronghorn herd as it moves up into Jackson? Unfortunately, we don't have that expertise in our office, so we rely on our sister agencies, the Game and Fish Department, to give that to us. You'll find their comments within our detailed analysis, and that's what we had to go on. There's not an economic tie to it. We don't have a way to do that economic tie, but it is referenced in the detailed analysis and provided for the board for their consideration.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So in the beginning, you talked about there being $22.3 million that you're receiving on this land. What's the total acreage of state land in Wyoming?
The total acreage in state land for surface is approximately 3.4 million. For subsurface is 3.9 million.
Okay. So then you talked about that this acreage would be sold in 35-acre parcels. Is that correct?
No, ma'am. The highest and best use for the property, based on the appraiser's assessment of its highest and best use, was for 35-acre home sites.
Okay.
We anticipate providing the Board of Land Commissioners an option to sell the 640 acres in one chunk.
Oh, one chunk. Okay. And so then the 40 million, or the last number that you gave that the state lands would be getting each year, would be based upon the sale of 640 acres.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more? Yes, sir.
You have, sorry, yeah, just a general question. You said something like $230 million in income in a year. I think you said something about that. How much of that is just ongoing revenue, and how much of that was from sales of parcels?
Great question. Was no sales of parcels. We didn't complete any sales in fiscal year 23, so that was ongoing use, mostly from oil and gas royalties.
Yes. Thank you. Do you have you ever used an economist to try to determine the value of, or the economic value of intangible assets like a pronghorn migration route, the public access to hunting and recreation areas, scenic values? Has the state tried to find someone who could analyze that for them?
I'm sure the state has. The Office of State Lands has not. And one of the reasons is, and we run into this question a lot, how do you tie that benefit, that intangible benefit, to one blue square? You can do it fairly easily on the whole corridor or a whole region, but to tie it to that specific blue square, that specific parcel of state trust land, is extremely difficult, so we haven't been able to do that.
So this wouldn't end up in a land swap at the end. You said it was extremely difficult and to exchange for BLM land. Is that not a possibility in this? Has that already gone through that process?
We have gone through that process, and we
Okay.
have recognized the complexities. I don't think it's something that we wouldn't do or couldn't do. What we need to do is analyze the disposal, and that's what we're doing now. That doesn't mean it couldn't go to an exchange. The Board of Land Commissioners still has full authority. We're just providing them with all the information that we can so that they can make a decision on its disposal, if that's appropriate or not.
So something else could happen in this end.
Yes, ma'am.
You don't know what, so.
Hi, thank you. I had a quick question. So at this point in the process, are you guys considering still being able to sell this to the Grand Teton National Park if they can come up with the funds? Or at this point, is it auction only?
At this point, it is auction only.
Okay.
That is the only authorization we have. Without direct sale authorization provided by the legislature, it's the only option.
Okay, and then, sorry, I have a couple questions. I'll be quick. My second question is, would you or the board provide, I guess, some sort of favor to a bidder if they had some sort of wildlife or conservation background or purpose?
And that's a great question. It's very difficult for us to do. We're following a constitutional mandate. The constitutional mandate says that all state lands have to be sold at public auction for the highest possible proceeds. Doesn't give us any other or things to look at outside of that. So
Okay.
difficult question to answer.
Yeah. Last question. Is the board allowed to put terms of sale on the sale?
Again, a very difficult question to answer. It's been a conversation point throughout this whole process. What's the board's ability to do that? And we're still analyzing that.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Lawson from Casper. I'd like to thank both of you for taking the time to come to Casper tonight and put on this presentation and answer our questions. I do appreciate that. I've got a couple of quick questions. One observation is that obviously this parcel's been in the portfolio for since what, statehood? And what is the need at this point in time, the urgency to sell this parcel? It's my understanding we're not in an educational funding crisis currently, and it seems to me to retain this parcel in the portfolio, it will only become more valuable over time. We're not creating any new lands. So if you could answer that, I have one follow-up question.
Yeah, and I don't think we can provide an answer on its immediacy. We manage land all day, every day, and it's just the normal evolution of things. As you can tell from the timeline, this has been a discussion point going back to 2003, moving forward in increments very slowly. This just happens to be the next step in that process. There's nothing else really driving it.
My second question is, I've been involved very deeply ever since Governor Freudenthal signed the first executive order on sage grouse protections stipulations. You mentioned this falls under, is located within a core area. How will the executive order impact development on that parcel once it's sold to private interest? In particular, my knowledge over the last, well, ever since the executive order was first established, has been with surface mining activities. But to my knowledge, there's never been a situation arise yet with Sigit involving any type of residential development under the executive order. Any perspective on that?
Well, we would have to refer back to the executive order, and we'd have to understand what kind of development is actually out in front of this thing. So a lot of speculation occurs. But the executive order is clear that anytime an entity needs a state permit to do something on that land, that it's subject to the requirements of that executive order. And that's probably the best answer I can provide for you.
Thank you.
Does the scenic easement along the highway, first of all, is that in perpetuity? And who holds that easement?
The Department of Interior holds that easement. Thank you, Jeremy. And it is in perpetuity, yes.
Okay. And would that restrict access to the rest of the property, the rest of the section outside of the easement?
We believe it does. We believe that we're hindered by that easement from getting access into the property.
Getting across the easement to the rest of the land.
Yes, sir.
Does that affect the appraised value?
The appraiser did take that into consideration when he came up with his opinion of value. I don't remember the exact comments he used for that.
And then the appraisal, is that done by an independent outside person?
Yes, sir. Yeah, the appraisal was done by an independent party. It was done with instructions from our office and from the Department of Interior. It was reviewed by both parties as well when he was done.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Jason, what is the status of the Interior Department's money at this stage? And where are they in the potential for negotiating a purchase?
Governor, that's a great question. I don't know that I can speak for the Department of Interior and where their funding sits. I know that they have been actively trying to prepare for this, but where they are exactly, I can't answer that question.
Well, first of all, thanks to Director and Deputy for driving up here, and safe travels home tonight in the dark, but appreciate you coming up here and talking to us in Casper. This question was brought up to you today in a legislative meeting. I just want to try to understand it, and it's all about your rules in OSLI, and maybe you can explain to me this whole Category 1, which gets moved on for the disposal list in Category 1. And it only gets a year to stay there, is my understanding. It either needs to move to Category 2 or be withdrawn. And so it gets moved on the last day of 2016, 12/31. So you got a year clock ticking. And at the latest, it should have been early January of 18. And it doesn't get removed. And now it gets moved all of a sudden to Category 2 for disposal. And you have those rules. How did that happen, I guess? And then that's the first question. Then I think all of us want to understand how this auction is going to work, But that's my first question. How did this go from Category 1, sit forever? And I know today you said COVID, but COVID was, I was in the legislature the last day for COVID, and this is a couple of years before COVID. So what happened?
Yeah, great question. So there's not a ceremony for a parcel to be placed on the Category 1 list or off of the Category 1 list. There's no documentation that's required for that. Obviously, the Board of Land Commissioners gave us direction to place it on that list on December 31st, 2016, and that's what we did. But when it fell off, if it fell off, there was no documentation that tracked that. That's been a point of conversation. That parcel's been a point of conversation since then, since 2003, for possible disposal. And that's what the rules state, that anybody can identify a parcel for possible disposal. And when they do that, it's placed on the Category 1 list. Now, anybody can do that. Any member of the public or the director or the Board of Land Commissioners, obviously. So what we feel is that the parcel has been on the Category 1 list for quite some time. If we hadn't had a conversation within a year, it unceremoniously came off. Another conversation identified it. It was unceremoniously put back on. That's happened through time. We talked about COVID because we had a situation where we couldn't go do all of our administrative requirements to move Category 1 parcels onto Category 2 with travel restrictions and things like that. So the director made a blanket authorization that everything on Category 1 got an extension through COVID to where we could actually get out, travel, and do our administrative requirements. So that's why we mentioned COVID this morning. It got that blanket authorization to be extended. However, it's important to note that anybody at any time can move that parcel onto Category 1. When we were ready, waiting and discussing the legislative intent and what their possibilities were, obviously the director didn't want to move too fast in front of that. Those were the conversations had at the time, working with the legislature to try to find a positive solution for that direct sale authorization. And when that all didn't come to fruition, the only option left was to further the conversation and move it to the Category 2 list. So that's the answer we should have gave this morning, is that it can move on and off. There's no obligation for it to never come back on the Category 1 list once it's been there and once it's dropped off.
Well, thank you. But I think, isn't there part of your rules too, though, the notice you have to go when it goes to Category 2, you have to notice Game and Fish, state parks and others. And that was a couple of years late. How does that, I don't understand it, I guess. There's a time, there's 2 years missing here, and all of a sudden this thing pops up for sale.
Sure, and great question. So notice isn't prescribed. It's not told exactly how that will happen. And we've been having conversations with those two entities throughout this whole time. We've been talking about all those parcels. It's my understanding that it's not just notice, but we need to seek comment from those entities to be included in the detailed analysis. And that's what we did. And that's what you see in the detailed analysis is the final response to that request.
Okay, thank you. And I think for all of us, the Constitution stipulates, your rules stipulate it, statute, this auction, it has to go to the highest bidder. And I guess I'm getting fuzzy kind of like comments I'm hearing out in the world that, well, if we don't like it, who is the highest bidder, maybe we can use some language in a rule or something to say, no, we're not going to sell it to you, a foreign government or a couple billionaires. We're going to sell it instead for much less to somebody else, the Park Service, who it should probably go to eventually, right? But how can you do that? I mean, the Constitution rules all this. You got to sell it to the highest bidder.
And as we stated earlier, Representative, the Constitution says you must sell at auction for the highest possible proceeds. All the other conversations that have been had haven't landed in the spot where it's a direction that we're moving that we're aware of. They may be conversations, but we know that we have that constitutional mandate.
Where does ethics run in all this? Is there any ethics?
The question was, where does ethics run in all of this? Right. So what we're doing is providing the Board of Land Commissioners information, detailed analysis, public comment. They are the elected officials required to make the decision. They are required to make that decision, and they can use whatever they need to make that decision.
And I just really want to say, this isn't anybody at UIS in your office, but it just feels like you guys are being pushed to rush this. That's what I feel like. I don't know if that's right, but, it's been in our inventory since 1890, as Mr. Lawson said. It just feels like all of a sudden there's a rush now on December 7th. The 5 electeds are going to decide whether or not to auction it. I guess that's my last question for all of us. So it hasn't been decided yet, but it will be decided at that December 7th meeting of whether or not to go forward to auction. Is that correct?
Representative, that is our expectation, yes. And that does follow the rule requirements as well. Once the detailed analysis has been published, once we've done the public comment period, at the next meeting, we present this transaction to the board. So that's the track we're on.
Okay. And again, I really appreciate your work, both of you, for the state of Wyoming. It's really incredible, important work. And I just want to, I don't know if you're getting pushed or what's happening. I don't know. But I really appreciate you, and keep up the good work, and we'll keep working on this. Next.
Any more questions?
So there is no direct need for the $62 million, correct? I mean, $80 million in just property tax alone came out of Teton County in the past year. Where is that direct call for the $62 million? I'm with him on why are we selling this now? What's the big rush to get rid of this? We've kind of stood up and said no twice already.
So again, there's not a hand saying I need $62 million, and we never see that hand for any of the revenue we derive from state lands. Our mission is fiduciary. We are to make revenue from these lands the largest possible proceeds. That's what we're doing. We do that all day, every day, have done it for 133 years, hope to do it for 133 more.
Are there any other parcels you guys are considering selling, or have you guys tried to put other stuff up for auction other than this one in Teton County?
Yes, sir. I think on the list, we have 4 other parcels across the state that are on the Category 2 disposal list.
Okay.
Thank you all for your questions. We're going to take a short break now and make sure that everybody that would like to provide comment, if you'll fill out one of those pink forms that were on the table as you came in, that would be great. And if you'll bring them up here, then we'll start calling people up to provide their comment. We do have the room until 7, so we want to get through as many folks that want to speak as possible. So why don't we just take a short break and get the forms filled out, and then I'll give you some quick ground rules and we will proceed from there. Thank you. Ding, ding, ding. Thank you. All right. Okay, we are ready to commence the public comment period. So again, thank you all for coming this evening. We'd like to get through as many folks as possible. We only have the room till 7, but we'll try to get through as quickly as we can. So we would ask that folks try to keep their comments focused and stay on the topic of the proposed Kelly parcel disposal only. We know that some folks are very passionate about the Kelly parcel, but we ask that we all proceed to be respectful of other opinions and viewpoints. This is a public comment period. It's not a debate. It's not an argument. We want to hear from you. The most helpful comments to us are anything that you can find from the detailed analysis that maybe we got wrong or isn't exactly right in your opinion, or any other ideas and thoughts that you might have about the proposal. Like I said, we've received a number of folks' comments who are opposed to it. So if you share somebody's thoughts and want to just say ditto, that's an acceptable comment as well in the interest of time that we have tonight. So with that, I will begin calling folks up. And when you come up, if you'll just sit in front of one of the microphones and press the button so it's green. And then, oh, thank you, Representative. No, that's fine. Okay, yep, no problem. All right, we're putting you on the bottom. Hopefully everybody can be concise, and we do not intend with the crowd we have tonight to limit the amount of time that people can comment, but if we get short on time, we may consider doing that. So without further ado, Chris Peterson. If you'll come up and
there we go. So I'm Chris Peterson. I live here in Casper. I guess there's a lot of concern over this Kelly parcel, and I think rightfully so. I oppose this thing going to the auction block just for the fact that it's so important to our wildlife, to our recreators. It's like a key piece, a signature piece of what the state of Wyoming is, between the elk, the sage grouse, the antelope, the deer, and the game and fish reports. If you read those, it's crucial habitat to all those species, to bighorn sheep, moose. I mean, the western toad, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of species that the game and fish has to look after that use this habitat, if not year round, for a good portion of the year. It's very crucial to them. And I would hate to see this go to auction to the highest bidder in the state of Wyoming not have any say over what's going to happen to it. I believe that if it goes to sale, it should be a direct sale to Grand Teton National Park.
thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Next, we have Pete Madsen.
And my name's Pete Madsen. I live here in Casper, and I'm going to say ditto to most of what was just said, and reiterate that it's an important parcel, and it is hard to look at the value of just one blue little square. But if you zoom out a little bit and look at the surroundings of that blue little square, it's pretty significant, easy to see the value of Grand Teton National Park, and the value of this parcel in particular is much more than the financial and the revenue aspect of it. And I think it's important to be to not be sold out to the highest bidder, and to be used by the public as much as possible, whether that be through the National Park Service or through the state. But I do oppose the sale going to auction and any other sale other than to the National Park Service.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Patrick Sweeney.
Thank you. Pat Sweeney from Casper. I did bring in a copy of the Constitution, and according to the Constitution, unfortunately, it does have to be auctioned. And but number one, I'd ask that the commissioners would delay instead of the process moving forward. I would hope that at the December meeting that they would either delay or let the legislature meet. And this could be a priority for the legislature. But in order for that to happen, it would need delayed until after the legislature meets. And maybe that could be a win. Obviously, it's already appreciated in value when compared to the Antelope Flats in that short amount of time, and who knows how much more value could be added. I also believe that in my mind, and I think I mentioned this a couple of years ago to you at a meeting in Lander, I still believe that if we could do a partial exchange, I think we still should get cash for the parcel. I do believe it should go, the highest and best use is to maintain it for Grand Teton National Park. But I do believe that we can take cash. I know it's complicated on the federal side in particular, but if we could gain the entire landscape of the Powder River Basin out of the federal hands and into Wyoming's management, and still provide back to the federal government some sort of slight sliver of the minerals taken out of there. Currently it's 50-50, but maybe they get 15% override. And I think the main takeaway for me is that the land board should delay and reevaluate. You're just providing the overview and the mechanism, and it's up to them.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jake Hutton. Mr. Hutton, I know that you spoke at the meeting in Jackson, so whatever you have that might be different from that would be helpful.
Yeah, I've got another page
Okay.
of petitions here. Everybody off track, 45 minutes, that's that.
Thank you.
Bet. She said she already heard me speak in Jackson, so I'll face you guys for some of this, because some of it's here for the crowd. Good evening, folks. Hello, fellow conservationists and members of Nicaragua County.
Excuse me. Wait. We have to. There are people out there that may want to.
I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to support this issue and to help protect Wyoming's wild places and heritage. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jake Hutton. I own and operate JH Outfitting Company with the help of a very hard, talented working crew of cowgirls, cowboys, a well-mannered horse herd, and a couple of good dogs. My company offers custom-tailored trail rides to a 7-course locally sourced fine dining farm-to-table meal out in the Kelly parcel. My horses also graze out there. Disposal, as our elected officials have put it, is why we're all here tonight. They plan to take this piece of pure Wyoming and dispose of it. Now, it's an interesting word, disposal. Mr. Webster defines it as the action or process of throwing away or getting rid of something in its first definition. And its second is the sale of shares, property, or other assets. Now, if that's the case, why didn't the state say they're going to sell this? Perhaps it's because the first definition is better fitting. Now, sadly, I've had to dispose of a few horses over my life, and I've put plenty of things down my kitchen sink disposal, but I can't think of a single inch of Wyoming I would incinerate and send down the drain. And I've covered some country. Growing up, I traveled all over the Equality State, riding saddle broncs and participated in school sports. I've worked and owned and outfitting businesses that operate in some of the most remote places left in North America. Recently, I drove a 90s Ford pickup from Jackson to the tip of South America on a wild hair when my housing fell apart, as it often does in that town. I've driven to both sides of the country and made attempts at living there, yet each time I leave, I find myself coming back home to Wyoming. I grew up in Johnson County off the eastern slope of the Bighorn Mountains, an area deeply rooted in cowboy culture and heritage. Legends such as Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid frequented the area, finding refuge in the rough countryside that can only be accessed horseback. In 1902, Owen Wister wrote the first ever Western fiction novel, The Virginian, based off of what he observed from his balcony suite in the Occidental Hotel, which is still in operation today. And I encourage you to book a stay if you ever have the chance. You can thank Johnson County for any Western movie, book, or John Wayne flick you have enjoyed. I can safely tell you I understand Western heritage and culture because I grew up surrounded by it. At times, I find myself frustrated living in Jackson because, unlike Johnson County, Jackson seems bound and determined to scrub out any bit of Western heritage it has left. And isn't that history what got us all here in the first place? Now, I'm an outfitter, a farrier, and an EMT on ski patrol in the winters. None of those are easy jobs. I work hard for the money I earn, and my word has always meant something. My working man's handshake behind it means even more. Deals in my world, sometimes large, are casually closed over the trust of another man's word in that handshake. And through the trust, those contracts are always fulfilled. I signed a 5-year contract with the state last year that they also signed, leading me to believe I should have the confidence in that transaction for the next 5 years. If my working man's handshake carries weight, then surely the official signed documents of the state carried more. The state then proceeded to sign a new 5-year contract with Dave Hunger of Teton Mountain Bike Tours in August, only to call myself, the Robinsons, and Dave around 7 a.m. mid-September to tell us they were planning to put the Kelly parcel back up for public auction, after which our contracts were terminated and that they would be taking public comments for the next 60 days. Now, I don't know about you, but that seems like a pretty clammy handshake to me. I'm proud to say that under my use, this square mile parcel of land has looked the best it has in generations. Under my outfit's watch, we have left more grass for the wildlife than ever before. It's a rare morning wrangle that we don't see the resident coyote den out taking in the sunrise, flush blue grouse and sage grouse, see a black bear, elk, deer, pronghorn, moose, or even a grizzly bear occasionally. But none of that is mentioned in the so-called detailed analysis the state has compiled. The fact that this land lies directly in line of the pronghorn migration route is also mysteriously missing. A herd that took such a hit this past winter, only 9 known does made it back to Grand Teton National Park. And we're relying on those 9 animals to pass on that route of migration, or there will no longer be pronghorn in Grand Teton National Park. Myself and my crew invested time and money into a fence line that separates the Kelly parcel from its neighbors. We did the entire 4 miles of fence to coexist with the wildlife and hold our horse herd in. We dropped the wire where wildlife had been struggling to cross and replaced it with smooth wire. We put plastic flags back on the wire so the grouse could spot it and not fly into it. We worked with our neighbors to the east, Bridger Teton National Forest, and ran a new line of electric fence back on the actual property line that had previously been off by a 1/4 mile. That mile of eastern fence line is removable and comes down now in the fall to allow easier passage for the wildlife migrating through, like the pronghorn, in dire need of our help right now. Prior to my operation, cattle graze this land. It's allocated for 325 head of cow-calf pairs. Cattle can be lazy. They graze in the easy access grass, stay grouped in large herds, and being a ruminant, their feces does not break down very fast. Much like the buffalo chips of the past that the settlers burned on their way out west, cow pies dry out, harden up, and take years to break down. Horses, on the other hand, roam more than cattle, disperse a lot, and graze up to the top of the big hill just to do it. Instead of grazing 325 head of cattle, we grazed 20 or 30 horses and made a significantly smaller impact on this land, leaving more grass to the wildlife than ever before. A positive impact we got to see firsthand every day with each new wildlife sighting as more and more species came back home. Prior to our fence repairs, the cattle would wander out and graze on Grand Teton National Park and the forest. I can proudly say my herd of horses never once trespassed in either neighbor's land, yet more and more species continue to grace us with their presence in the Kelly parcel all summer. We have to ask ourselves, what are the state's priorities here with selling this land? I'm aware they're under an obligation to maximize income off of school sections. I'm also aware that the oil and gas revenue that used to provide much of that income is no longer there. But we have known since I was a child that those avenues of income are in jeopardy, and we needed to seek out new ways to capitalize on these parcels of land. I thought that's what we paid our elected officials to do. I offered every member of the board that will vote on this issue an opportunity to come out for a ride, at the very least a hike, and see why this land is valuable and worth protecting. The so-called 59-page detailed analysis used the same photo 7 times, so I didn't want to make them waste their time on that sloppy work. Heck, there's entire businesses in Jackson that specialize in real estate property photography. I would think if something's going to go for sale at $62 million, which is undervalued, one would at least take the time to get decent photos of it. Sadly, the only person that responded to my offer was our Secretary of State, Chuck Gray. And for that, I thank you, Mr. Secretary. Yes, perhaps disposal is the proper word for what's going on here. Effectively managing natural resources and funds for the current and future generations. That's the mission statement of the Office of State Lands and Investments. Now, I don't know about anybody else in this room, but if the state has their way, it won't be me that can afford one of the parcels they plan to chop up this piece of pure Wyoming into. It'll be some rich California billionaire or some Saudi Arabian sheik that's going to buy that land. I have a hard time understanding how that's looking out for current and future generations of Wyoming residents. Education is what this issue keeps circling back to, but I've yet to hear of anyone speak about the education the land itself provides. As an education of Wyoming, an education we Wyoming residents know well. Calloused hands, hard work, long days, and opportunities to put meat on your table. Values such as honesty, trust, pride, and compassion. The code of the West that we all live by is built around these principles. We had the opportunity to hire a 14-year-old young man this summer whose father recently passed away. This kid learned how to dig post holes through hard, rocky soil, how to saddle and ride horses, how to repair fence so it coexists with our wild neighbors, and how to shoe horses, and even how to drive a standard pickup, to name the few skills he now carries in his back pocket thanks to the wild land. He also learned how to take pride in his work and subsequently pride in himself. I'm proud to shake that young man's calloused hand and call him a friend. If this land goes to auction, we will be robbing him of his further education. There are 3 things I want you to keep in mind tonight. 1, the State Land of Office and Investments, the State Office of Lands and Investments made $80 million in property tax just from Teton County alone. It has no direct need or deficit they can explain for the $62 million they plan to sell the Kelly parcel for. Furthermore, I'd love to meet whoever appraised that land, because I'd love to buy an acre for less than $200,000 in Teton County. Number 2, Wyoming State Trust land is our public land as Wyoming residents. Yes, Jason pointed out in his slideshow, this is not BLM or National Forest land, and it has its own set of rules. But Wyoming State Trust land is our land, and every Wyoming resident is a member of that trust. In Wyoming, we choose to keep the majority of our wealth in real estate, because early on, someone was smart enough to realize that the world keeps making more people, but it's not making any more wild places. The real estate allows Wyoming residents to capitalize on the land, feed and sustain themselves from it, while the state can still hold on to its assets and allow them to grow. You can't graze a bank account, but you can graze the Kelly parcel.
Mr. Hutton.
The Office of State Land and Investments has attempted to try and sell this land 2 other times. As Jason pointed out, they even went so far as to get some laws changed to get it sold. Yet every time the people of Wyoming have stood up and said no. The fact has me greatly concerned. Why are our elected officials wasting tax dollars trying to get in on something that we have said no to? Do they not hear our voice? And if this is the case, I hope you're paying attention when your voice is heard at the next election. Our outfitting business is eco-friendly, green Wyoming heritage tourism that should be supported by the state and not cut down. This industry is what our community is built upon in Jackson, and I'm proud of our Wyoming school systems and a product of them. I'm also an entrepreneur that has to figure out a way to keep some of Wyoming heritage in a town that's quickly losing any left. Please don't kick my knees out for some billionaire to move in. I urge our elected officials to reconsider this sale. Too much is at risk in Wyoming by putting it up for public auction. This is Wyoming land that should remain in Wyoming residents' hands. As the Code of the West states, some things are not for sale. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. Next, we have Governor Mike Sullivan.
this is one of the controversial items that come to us as a state. There is 60 some million or more dollars involved in it. There may be valid reasons for putting up sale at this stage. But I believe for the very reasons that everybody here is here and has talked about already, that it should not be sold, if at all possible, at public auction. And I would urge the legislature and the commissioners, the board, to observe the situation where there's a potential for a purchaser with money and with a foundation, the Grand Teton National Park Foundation, willing to raise additional money to negotiate a sale and retain the values that this land possesses for the people of Wyoming and the people of this country within Grand Teton National Park, which I fear we risk those values if it goes to public auction. Now, I've learned a lot here today from your presentation, but it seems to me that I agree with Jake. I agree with everything Jake says, but a lot that, and others, that this at least ought to be delayed and considered, and negotiations continued with Grand Teton National Park, and a price reached, and then buy it or not buy it, and ask the legislature to authorize a direct sale to the park. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Tom Radosevich.
We're green. Hi, yeah, I'm Tom Radosevich. I am a local family medicine physician here in Casper. I grew up in Rock Springs. I am representing somewhat the Wyoming Wildlife Federation here today. I was asked to come here by our legislative liaison, Jess Johnson, who does a lot of great work for our federation and for the state. And given her talking points, I concur. And those are that the willing buyer of the Grand Teton National Park is the best place for this parcel to go to. Without a doubt, it consolidates ownership. It keeps it wildlife friendly. It maintains access. So that's what we're most in favor of. We're certainly not in favor of a auction where this parcel ends up cut up. If it should go to auction, we definitely want it to maintain grazing, maintain hunting access, and maintain recreation opportunities for the public. I didn't know anything. I didn't know I had a connection to this parcel except until I talked to Jess and I found out, oh, I actually know this piece of ground fairly well. As a seventh grader at the East Junior High School in Rock Springs, I went to the Teton Science School, which is right over the hill from this. And so we explored this piece of country quite well. And then growing up, raising my family, we Nordic skied in this piece of ground every year for many decades. And it provided a lot of opportunities for my family, things that my children probably would have never ever seen. The Nordic ski touring through this country is fantastic. And best is that you have an incredible view of the Tetons, which you don't have if you're underneath the Tetons. But these are the wildlife that gets commented on here, the pronghorn, the elk, et cetera. Very important, very important. But some of the wildlife that I've seen out in this part of the country is just amazing. This is the only time I've ever seen a great gray owl. First time my children ever saw a porcupine. We spent probably 30 minutes watching a porcupine do its thing. We've seen coyotes and foxes. You see moose out there in the winter. The wildlife, the Game and Fish went so far as to talk about toads, which is I appreciate very much. Wyoming Wildlife Federation supports hunting and hunting access and conservation to enhance hunting, but we also appreciate the value of all those other little things that oftentimes go unnoticed unless you look. Okay, so I appreciate that, and thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Amber Pollock.
Good evening. Thank you very much for being here tonight and giving us the opportunity to address you. My name is Amber Pollock, and I'm a distillery owner here in Casper. You might be wondering, what does a booze maker hundreds of miles away from this particular parcel of land, what type of perspective might I have to offer? But I've been fortunate enough to be running a business for the last 10 years that acts as a common pit stop for folks passing through on their pilgrimage to the parks, folks who are from Wyoming, around the country, and even around the world. And I've been witness over that time to just a little slice of the journey that they're taking to go see one of Wyoming's most beautiful places. It probably doesn't surprise you to know that, part of my job as a bartender is to have conversations with these folks and to learn about them, learn about what they're excited for, either going to the parks or coming back. And as you can imagine, not one of them has ever mentioned to me that their enthusiasm is derived from going to visit a new development or see a housing project that's being executed in Teton County, but instead about the beautiful landscapes, the wildlife, and all of the natural beauty that parcel and the others around it have to offer. And so I do see this particular sale as being particularly relevant to me because a lot of my business is derived from that tourist traffic. They come right through Casper and they come right through my front doors. And so it is in my interest and all of Casper's interest to make sure that that asset stays as healthy, as vibrant, and as attractive to members of the tourism travelers that are from the state and from outside the state. And so I'm opposed to the disposal of the land through auction only because I think it's a really limited mechanism. It allows us to take into account the monetary value of the parcel only and does not allow us to take into account the broader value that parcel offers. And so I would urge the office to postpone and wait for a better mechanism that allows us to fully appreciate the value of that land and realize the monetary and non-monetary value that it offers, not just to that area, but to the rest of the state, our city included, and my business included. And I think that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're starting to run out of time here, folks. Dan Neal.
Thank you. My name is Dan Neal. I'm from Casper. Once again, like others, I appreciate the opportunity to comment. I'm opposed to the sale by auction. I think if the land is sold, it should be somehow transferred to Grand Teton National Park. As far as the evaluation of the parcel goes, I'd urge the staff to look to the University of Wyoming Economics Department, see if anyone there can provide you some way to provide some economic value to these intangibles that people here obviously appreciate so much. If there's not an expert at the university, I'm sure that department could refer you to someone. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Bruce Lawson.
My name is Bruce Lawson. I'm from lifelong resident of Casper, Wyoming. I'd like to thank Jennifer and Jason for coming to Casper and taking the time to give us that excellent presentation that you provided tonight. And I do appreciate your time. I know you've been around the state a lot lately. I'd also like to recognize the support staff here that's taking part in recording our comments. And I'd also like to thank those in attendance for their respectfulness to others, their civility, and their politeness. We I find that's lacking quite a bit anymore in our society, and I appreciate that. But I'll get to the point. I'd like to state for the record that I'm opposed to the sale of the Kelly parcel at this point in time. I would like to see the Office of State Land and Investment and the State Land Board postpone this proposed auction until a later date, and I would hope that a greater effort can be made to work with the legislature as well as the Park Service and the federal government to find another option for having the Park Service find the ability, maybe through groups such as the one of the conservation groups, to help raise money so the federal government can purchase that parcel instead of having it go to a real estate developer. I don't think anybody wants to see that 640 acre turned into residential development, you know, for the sake of not just the residents, the people of Wyoming that enjoy that part of the state, but people from all over the world, you know, have a stake in it as well. So I would hope that possibly the sale auction could be delayed, postponed, so that other options can be pursued to find another way to prevent that from going into private development. I would also like to thank Governor Sullivan for his participation tonight, as well as my representative, Steve Harshman. Thank you for coming tonight and offering your perspective, as well as former Representative Pat Sweeney. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, sir. All right, we're going to have to start winding it up. They told us to be finished by 7, but I'm going to give some more time here. I think people have some important things to say. Mary England. Okay. How about Levi Eggleston?
Good evening. My name is Levi Eggleston. I'm from Casper. I would just like to say that whether this is a direct sale to someone or at auction, I think that it needs to maintain the values with grazing access, hunting access, maintain the scenic value. Ultimately, I'd like this to be in hands that can conserve this and maintain the migration corridors for the antelope and other wildlife that goes through there. I think it's got great value outside of the monetary aspect, but overall, I'd like to see it go into hands that can continue to manage that with sales, having that restriction on grazing and hunting access. But I think it has great benefits to the school district, does great things for Wyoming as a whole, and can continue to educate people. But overall, I think it needs to have terms of sale in place.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right. Looks like Katie Cheeseborough.
Good evening, Director Scoggins. My name is Katie Cheeseborough, and I'm the Executive Director for the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation. And as I recall, you were on the Wyoming Wildlife Task Force and did a great job. I can't imagine being on that committee, so thank you for your service on that. But as you'll recall, you guys spent a great deal of time talking about bighorn sheep and their value to Wyoming residents and non-residents. And there is a situation in the Jackson area where there has been so much development in bighorn sheep winter range that some of the Jackson herd is forced to winter at high elevation, and the herd itself is struggling. And those herds in that area are core native herds, and when they go, they're gone. That is an actual definition that we have in the state. And so I'm not sure that was totally covered in your analysis. So I just wanted to make that point. And you well know the economic benefits of
those hunters and recreators and just people who like to see bighorn sheep. So I just wanted to make that comment. I also wanted to mention that there are only some benefits to our school systems that are financial, like Mr. Radosevich. I grew up in Laramie, and I also got to attend Teton Science School through my school, and also later in life as for a young women in science program. And we did get to enjoy that parcel and the good management you guys have done on that parcel. And I think another issue that was brought up was ethics. And I think there's ethics education at play here. The Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation is in a situation where we're struggling to increase bighorn sheep in Wyoming due to broken promises and contracts with our ag community. And that is from the federal government. And there's no trust there for the federal government in the ag community. They do currently trust our state government, which is great. But if you continue to go through with this and break current agreements and contracts, that really weakens that trust. And I fear that that would have issue for other government agencies such as the Game and Fish. I would request that you would postpone the sale and auction of this parcel to fulfill your contracts to the ag interests that are currently grazing on the Kelly parcel, and give time to really think through this and potentially give an opportunity for Grand Teton National Park to come up with the funds to purchase. Also, if you do choose to go through with the auction of the parcel, I would agree with Mr. Radosevich and Mr. Eggleston to please consider terms of sale, to continue to allow hunting, to continue to allow grazing, and that the sale be left up to the State Lands and Investment Board. And with that, I am done. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just have a couple more here. How about Connor, is it Wetzel?
Connor Wetzel, Casper resident. I too am opposed to the sale of this land, and if so, I would like to see stipulations maintaining in perpetuity the nature of it in the sense of it's a natural habitat for wildlife and public viewing. That being said, development of land is something that cannot be undone. And the implications of development on this land seem to have a very wide range of impacts on our wildlife and our public recreation opportunities. And should we allow this to happen, it sets a precedence that makes it hard to go back on. And so these are decisions that should be taken with great and tremendous amounts of care and thought and process into it. And seeing that this has started in 2003, I am aware that a lot has gone into it. However, it feels unwise to go through with the sale that I have seen nothing but public opinion saying they disapprove of. When you go forward with a sale for land that could be developmented or have development occur on it, like I just said, that can't go back. And so it should be something that is so unanimously seen as wise before we proceed in that direction. And I don't think by any means we're even close to unanimous in the direction of seeing this land developed. And so I would like to see this land maintain its wild nature and continue in perpetuity as is. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, tonight we have Representative Harshman.
Director, again, echoing everyone here, really appreciate your service to our state, you and the deputy, and nobody loves Wyoming more than you two. And we really appreciate your countless, tireless hours of work on this. And I think Governor Sullivan said it best. I mean, these aren't easy deals, and we really appreciate the way you're traveling around Wyoming and hearing from Wyoming citizens. Steve Harshman, I'm a native of Natrona County. I've had the honor to serve and represent people of Natrona County in the Wyoming State House. I think we all want to protect the park. I don't think anybody wants to build a casino on the Kelly parcel. But I think the issue, at least for me, and you mentioned it, these are trust lands granted to us in perpetuity at statehood. really for the benefit, our people, our children, our school system. And I get, so how do you balance that? And it's a tricky thing, but I think, a couple things. I think all the folks in Jackson question the appraisal. They're paying property taxes there. They're buying acreage. And I think, I won't say the name of the ranch that just came up for sale. It's probably not as special as this. It's a little less than half the size, but if you do the per acre, it's $100 million for this parcel. And that ranch has a conservation easement on it that can't be developed. And so I think, and then I think the Antelope Flats, 44 million, Representative Sweeney brought this up 5 years ago. If that's probably a pretty good comparison to this parcel. And I think, it's a 50% gain in 5 years, a little less. And so I think this thing is not going to, it's just going to keep working for Wyoming and appreciating asset. And you all know about the 6 acres. I think the town of Jackson bought for 28 million. And I get it. That's developed a little more and all that. But I mean, take that price times 640. I mean, you're in the billions of dollars. And it's just a priceless, probably the most priceless, valuable piece in our whole inventory. And unfortunately, we in our statehood, we've gotten rid of about 1 million acres. It's really unfortunate. And I think someone said it here, maybe Jake, they're making more people, but not making more land. And I just, I thank goodness that our Wyoming forebears didn't get rid of the Kelly parcel when it was only worth $1,000. They certainly could have. And I just think to have that forward look on this deal. And I just think, so the bottom line for me, I think, is, and we've gotten rid of some of these parcels, as you mentioned, the timeline, but I just think there's no hurry. We're not broke. And I think it's way too risky to auction. And that last bill that came through to authorize direct sale, and I put a big number on this. And, but I was working off real estate acreage in Teton County. And I probably went too high and the bill didn't pass, but I think that's got to be the way forward. So, so this land, if it is transferred, it's transferred into the park. I mean, I think everybody agrees with that. And I think people brought up a lot of good, on part of the deal ought to be the access to it and all those things. So there's a lot to do on this, but I think, we're not in a hurry on this. And that's all. I guess my thing is to everybody pause and take a breath. And so at this time, I would urge the 5 electeds who are the state land board, who have constitutional power to look after these lands, but within the sideboards that the legislature has provided, right? They don't have ultimate power. And so let us work together. We can find the right buyer for this at the right time and sell it for the right price that will truly benefit Wyoming's children then in perpetuity. So, but we're not broke, so let's not get rid of our gold. And so really, again, thank you for being here. Appreciate your service to our great state. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, that concludes the public comment period. Again, we appreciate very much your time and coming out and speaking to us this evening. We will continue to take written comment until December 1st. And again, we're continuing the roadshow Cheyenne on the 21st, which is Tuesday. And then after that, Cody on the 28th. So we will continue our travels around the state. We will bring back the comments to the Board of Land Commissioners. As we mentioned, no decisions have been made yet. We are just simply gathering the comments to provide to them. And if you have anything further, be sure to reach out to Jason or myself. So thanks again for coming this evening.